representation, that their voice will be heard. And this, we might switch it over. We might flip a district over to Republican.
I have all the confidence in you, and it looks like you've got enough people in there to vote to push you through to victory. And I know that you have just been pounding the pavement, and you've been getting a lot of responses from the folks of House District 92. And I remember when you were here last time, you were telling us how diverse that district is.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us how diverse it is and kind of where that leads us, like on the map?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the district is like a giant Z. For any of the folks at home that have ever taken a look at a House district or Senate district map, it is mind-boggling how they come up with the boundaries for these things. The district is shaped, like I said, like a giant Z throughout the center of the city. It starts over at right at about the Fairgrounds up to 13th Street, okay, Northwest 13th Street. Head east all the way through Classington Penn, curve down on that northern border down into 8th Street. So depending on what side of St. Anthony's Hospital you're in, Jonathan, if you ever get hurt, you go there. Depending on what side of St. Anthony's Hospital you're in, you may or may not be in my district. And then it curves back up to downtown up to 13th Street, and then the railroad tracks right by Camps. That makes a good border from there straight down. Actually, no, it cuts out to 235 to Walker, all the way down to 240, and then it cuts out in the bottom part of that Z. We have part of Valley Brook. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's.
And you have some of the flats too.
And we have some. Yeah, we have some of the flats. Actually, I have all the flats. Yeah,
you got all the flats.
Yeah, I have all the flats. We have flats, Metro Park, Classington Penn, Midtown, Downtown, Southside, Capitol Hill. Southern Oaks and Valley Brook, yeah.
Wow. And I know that we've got some excellent talking points that we're going to try to get to during our short 30-minute segment. And first, I was wanting to ask you, what are the biggest concerns that your people have when you're knocking that door? What is the first thing that they say? What are they mad about?
Oh, number one, public safety. People are very concerned. Downtown is doing fantastic, but the neighborhoods around it, it's nothing to hide there. They're lacking. They're lacking services. They're lacking, a lot of things that we see other neighborhoods are getting invested in. Our neighborhoods are not, and overwhelmingly, we do not have good roads, good streets. There's a spot right there on, I believe it's 23rd and Shields. It has been a mess for 6 or 7 years, and nothing's happened. You can't get an ambulance down it. Nothing. And if you have an emergency on 23rd Street there, just past the railroad tracks, that fire truck or those police, they got to go weaving through the neighborhoods to come get you.
Interesting. Wow.
So, little things like that. Of course, we have gangs. We have, the methamphetamine problem is huge. We also have a large number of abandoned homes and abandoned buildings. And things like that, they want to see those knocked down. Another big thing I hear is education, of course. We're having problems retaining teachers because of low pay. We're having problems, reaching out and making sure that kids are succeeding, because in a lot of my schools, I have kids that, English is their second language. We do not have enough teachers that are certified to teach to kids that English is their second language. So by not doing that, by not having those teachers there, we're failing those kids. So if they're not able to command the English language, we're severely limiting their ability to get a job, go to school, move on to learning a trade. That's the big priorities that we hear. That and just flat out jobs. Mm-hmm. We need those manufacturing jobs. We need labor jobs. We need stuff for working people, and we need to start moving those neighborhoods up, as opposed to following policies that are continually moving those neighborhoods down.
Mm. Well, these are some issues that we really need to tackle. And speaking of issues, has the incumbent to this seat addressed any of these issues or addressed them thoroughly?
Oh, you mean Representative Morissette, who's termed out, not the incumbent. Sure. Yeah, he's termed out. Yes. I think that Representative Morissette has stood up and represented his district, and he has done a good job at being a voice. I think what needs to change, though, is that we need a voice that's going to be heard by the majority party. As having a representative that is a member of the Democratic Party, those folks are not part of the budget process. Those folks are not part of putting forward policy, because their job is basically to be the loyal opposition. So oftentimes, whether it's good policy or not, it's meant to go. Their job is to go and fight out on the floor. And it was the same way when us Republicans were in the minority. Good or bad, they were fighting it. But the thing is, the people in House District 92, they deserve to be heard. Okay, they deserve a seat at that table, and they deserve to start having things happen in their district that starts moving life up. And I think that all of our representatives have that in mind, but the needs of our district, it's basically an emergency. We need something done, and we need something done now. And I've lived in the neighborhoods there for several years now. Even back in my days on Fox 25 News, I've lived in those neighborhoods, and I just see us continually being skipped over. And real change needs to happen.
Bringing a voice to the people.
Absolutely.
So there are definitely positives to having a Republican.
Oh, absolutely.
House District 92.
Absolutely.
I know that Governor Mary Fallin had given her State of the State address not too long ago, and one of the points that you had mentioned earlier is education.
Yes.
And one of the major concerns that she had was education attainment. And in the State of the State, she said, we must encourage more Oklahomans to continue their education beyond high school. And she also made it clear that Oklahoma's workforce is not meeting education level needs to sustain job growth. And she called this the skills gap. And so what is happening, the more time that goes on, more of these jobs require higher education. They require at least an associate's degree. They require at least some kind of certification, and the Oklahomans are falling behind that trend, and they cannot keep up because they are not qualified.
But Jonathan, if you notice, that's the same thing you hear every year in the State of the State. And I'm sure we've been hearing it for decades now. And it's true. It is absolutely true. It's funny. Just last month, when I was putting Christmas decorations away up in the attic, I pulled out a box that was left there by the previous owner, and I found a news article. It was from May of 1975, and I opened it up, and there I saw. Believe it or not, it was crazy. It was an article from one of the times that President Gerald Ford took a dive off of Air Force One when he fell down the steps. He was known for doing that all the time. And I was like, oh, wow, hey, check this out. It's in Oklahoma. And then I looked over to the right of that picture of poor President Gerald Ford taking a tumble down the steps. And there is then Governor David Boren saying, we have figured out how to solve the education problem in Oklahoma. I'll say that again. We have figured out how to solve the education problem in Oklahoma. There were massive teacher pay raises. Bureaucracy and stuff was way expanded. If you read this article, just a lot of money was thrown at the problem. And I think that absolutely giving teachers, a fair wage, securing good benefits for them, giving them the tools to get their job done is essential to keeping our teachers there. But that's only part of the equation. Where our money is being spent needs to be looked at. We need to start looking at administration. When we look at how much growth we've had in students in Oklahoma, it is drastically less than how much administration has grown. So while we're taking dollars, it's not necessarily getting to the classroom. It's getting to that upper echelon, the bureaucracy that is within a school. That's an issue that we need to take a look at. And I think that by moving around how we spend money, and we focus on and get others involved, get others involved. There was something that happened in Dayton, Ohio, when I was living up there. I was a reporter on ABC 22 up in Dayton. And at that time, I think the unemployment rate, don't quote me on this, folks, but it was somewhere between 14 and 17%. It was terrible. GM had packed up a couple years before. GE was laying people off. And I tell you, I felt like I was covering a homicide every night because their drugs were through the roof up in Dayton. It was terrible. just the economic devastation and the poverty and crime that unfolded after that. So Dayton, Ohio went forward and they looked into a plan. What can we do? We have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There's a lot of technology development. How can we start focusing our schools, business, a general plan for our city to focus on not only bringing jobs here, but preparing our local children for the future? And I think a lot of entities are doing that, but I think that we need to be a little bit more concise and realize what we have in front of us. Oklahoma City, we have a lot of oil and gas. We have a lot of industrial space that we can bring manufacturing back. We have a career tech system that is very good, and I would love to see expanded. Okay, and we have Tinker Air Force Base right next to us. There's a lot of opportunity here for that kind of drive, and I think with what the state does, we need to start addressing it and those factors on a local level to start working with the school district, start working with the colleges, start working with technology and industry, and start working with with our our military capabilities, and start preparing our children.
Right.
I think is a huge thing, and I think that if we can change the culture here in Oklahoma with those kind of driving forces, as opposed to where kids can grow up and know that, hey, there's these options before me. I think we'll have a lot more people looking to become, not only college graduates, but frankly, welders, tradesmen, and folks like that. That there's a whole wealth of opportunity here, and I think what we're tired of hearing, especially people like me, okay, especially folks like me. I'm running as a Republican, but I got to be honest with you, I don't really keep myself bound to any party. Okay, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, whatever you are. The fact of the matter is, we're tired of seeing the can kicked down the road. It's time that we start getting some things done, and we start addressing our problems. If we keep kicking the can down the road, then someday, all right, when Governor so-and-so in 2020's in there, all right, and somebody writes an article and they'll say that, oh, Representative Griffin, he's like, this isn't the thing to do. You're kicking the can down the road. And so when somebody opens up my attic, all right, 30 years, 40 years later, after I'm dead and gone, they'll be like, hey, look, they had the same problem 30 years ago. Because that's what I did. And I'm tired. Nobody should be opening up their attic and and finding newspaper articles and finding the same thing. Sorry about that tirade.
Folks, we are visiting with Joe Griffin. He is a candidate for the Oklahoma House of Representatives, and that is District 92. Now, Joe, you were talking about education, and then we were talking about President David Boren. And as we all know, he is proposing that penny sales tax to fix education. Is that thing going to fly or what?
I think that people who can afford that tax, okay, don't really see it as a big deal. But I'm going to tell you right now, in my district, the folks who can't afford that tax, it's a big deal.
Yes,
it's a big deal. It raises our sales tax, and anytime you do that, and this is what really drives. Just really kind of like burns me up a little bit, but burns other people up. When we passed maps, okay, and when we went to go and get Bricktown, there were direct goals of where that money was going. With this tax, we don't have absolute goals. We have indefinite goal out there. Well, teacher pay raises. Okay, well, how much? Okay, and we're going to keep this up for how long? And then, and higher education needs some too. Well, what's higher ed going to do with it? I don't know. We've got a couple of answers here and there. I don't know. And then it's like, well, what about? The thing is we can fund education, whether it's common education, career tech, or higher ed, without raising taxes on folks. What we are guilty of here as a state is, again, kicking the can down the road, not addressing problems. We have a budget right now that, last thing I heard, is about $1 billion. Might be a little bit more deficit. Or I like to call them budget gaps. is what we'll call it, because it's not a deficit. The money is not projected to be coming in. I'll put it that way. We have money right now, but the money's not projected to be coming in. So we'll say it's a budget gap. But we have roughly, I think it's about $10 billion, okay, budget. A little bit more. So 7.2 billion we actually control. The legislature actually controls, and they line and said, this is going to go to this is going to go to that. Then we have about 3.3 billion in there somewhere that they don't control. We call that, the common term for that is off the top funding. So there's great stuff in there. Stuff for transportation, stuff for education. Nobody really wants to touch that because we know we have problems. It's not only just the political hot button to it, but it's just the fact that, we know we have problems. We need to overcome those. However, there's funds there that we don't know where it's going. And we know what department, we know what project it says, but some of that stuff's been in place for 30, 40 years. It's probably not even fulfilling a modern goal anymore. We need to have the political backbone to go in and say, what are we gonna stop funding, and let's divert it to things that we need done. We need to not listen to the belly aching of some of these departments, and we need to do what needs to be done, because it's more than just a department head's budget. It's how are we going to serve the people of Oklahoma. And so it's just going to have to take willpower. It's going to have to take willpower and a lot of people with spines, and right. We need to do that. Another thing that really, another way we can address these budget problems, and getting back to some of the issues we were talking about, is we're scrambling for cash. Where are we going to get it? Well, I tell you, T.W. Shannon, when he was Speaker of the House, when I was on his team as his communications director, we helped develop a policy where we asked all the departments of the state to report how much real estate did they own. And I tell you, it was like pulling teeth. They didn't want to tell us, okay? And there was an article, I was actually in an article 2 weeks ago, Janelle Steckline wrote it from CMI, and when we found out how much they said they owned, we figured out that Oklahoma is the second largest, actually I think it's the largest landowner in the state. And really? For a state that does not have a lot of federal land around, or a lot of state-owned land, that does not have reservations. Like you go out to New Mexico, I think a majority of the land is owned by the federal government. The state government. Government is the largest owner out there. No shock. I mean, there's lots of test sites and stuff. But for here, especially a place that was a land run, we have an overwhelming amount of land here, and that is owned by the state. And they were directed, okay, you take these surplus properties and you start selling them. Start selling them or do something with them. If you're not going to do anything with them, we're selling them. OMES was charged with this. Well, when Speaker T.W. Shannon stepped down to go run for the Senate, that wasn't followed up on. And, we got rid of maybe a handful of properties. So at this time, we have countless properties throughout the state that are either not being used, okay, that agencies are giving away for $1. Oh, yeah, I caught one. Really? One. Oh, yeah. There's building up in Guthrie that was worth some big money, and I caught a state agency wanting to give that thing away for $1. And here I am, the communications director. My job is to go ahead and, promote policy. Well, I'm running the traps to make sure things are getting done. And I caught one of them, for $1. $1. I think it was like a $500,000 building. $1. Even if it was $50,000, that's 50,000, George Washingtons that you have, as opposed to just one.
Well, sure.
It's common sense.
Of course.
But we have things like that. We have buildings that are dilapidated, properties that aren't being taken care of all throughout the state. Those are eyesores, and they're just it's a waste of resources. Get rid of them. Sell them. And if it can't be sold, knock it down. Get some of the engineering department over at OU. Get some of those students. Make it some green space. Do something. But don't just sit there on property. Again, it takes somebody with, a lot of willpower, a political spine, and somebody who's going to keep going back saying, is the job getting done? And that's what we're lacking is we need people in there to get the job done. And I'm not saying it's going to fix the budget problem, but when we're in tough times like this and oil and gas are down, you can take that money and you can go ahead and put it in places and fill in the gaps. groups.
Right. And we're talking about saving money. I believe one of the members of our Oklahoma legislature had proposed that we consolidate our schools. And I thought it might have been more of a county plan, and each district be associated with each county and get rid of some of this administrative overhead that is sucking up our money. And that could be taken and used elsewhere. Do you have any ideas on that? Is that something that you would support?
You know, that's a tough question. As far as consolidating school districts, I think that there's a lot of pros out there to do it, but there's also a lot of cons. Some of those rural areas, let's call it for what it is. Nobody wants to see their kid on a bus for 3.5 hours. Okay,
Sure.
You know, you're really putting some stress out there if you start. And if you consolidate, what happens when a school does shut down and you have to stick your kid on a bus out there in the rural parts of the state, and your kid's on a bus for several hours waiting around? From that standpoint, as a parent, okay, I understand not wanting to do consolidation. From a budget idea, sure. From a budget standpoint, of course, it looks great. And I think that as legislators go forward and look at solving these issues, okay, and this is a big problem that I've seen with government from the time I was a TV reporter. I covered the legislature, local and city politics. I did investigative reporting. I've seen just about everything under the sun as far as goof ups and mistakes. And the biggest mistake that government makes is they do what feels right. They don't do what is right. And oftentimes when you're to find out what is right, it's not necessarily the hair trigger reaction. Oh, let's consolidate some schools. Well, hold on here. Let's slow down. Let's talk. Not take it off the table, but let's talk. And let's work through this and figure out if this is truly the right thing to do.
Right.
And I think that what I just said, they're doing what feels right, as opposed to doing what is right, is key. So.
Right. Folks, you're listening to Oklahoma Voice. I am Jonathan Core, and we are sitting down having a conversation with Joe Griffin. He is a candidate, and a Republican candidate at that, for House District 92. He's running for the Oklahoma House of Representatives. And Joe, with about the 4 minutes that we have left on the program, I wanted to talk just briefly about the crime and incarceration rates that we're experiencing here in Oklahoma. And that was one of the major points that Governor Fallin had addressed in her State of the State. And she gave the alarming figure that 1 in 11 Oklahomans serve time in prison at some point in their lives.
Yeah.
And many are first-time offenders with drug and or mental health problems.
Yes.
Now, she gave some other information, and she told us that we are spending about $19,000 a year on individual inmates. Each inmate costs about $19,000 a year to house.
That's cheap, and compared to some of the studies I saw, it can be more.
Yeah, and this, definitely. And I have seen some studies that have said higher than this, because this looked a little bit low to me. And then she was explaining that we could spend just $5,000 a year taking that would-be prisoner and sending him to a court and then giving them treatment. And that would be a lot cheaper and less people in the prison system. Give us some information about that.
There's no doubt that we have a severe incarceration problem here in Oklahoma. And you can be tough on crime, but you can be smart on crime also. And absolutely, the murderers, the rapists, the people that we should be afraid of, okay, they need to be behind bars. Okay, we don't need them on the streets. Now, people who are first-time offender, people suffering from drug addiction, nonviolent crimes, and I'm not saying all nonviolent crimes aren't worth some lengthy sentences, because there's some that are out there, especially when you're looking defrauding, seniors and things of that sort. I mean, that's awful stuff. You ought to be thrown in prison for a long time for that. But when you're dealing with nonviolent offenses like drugs, first-time offenders on that, People suffering from drug addiction. Those drug courts are doing wonders. Another thing that we're not properly investing in is technology. There are other states out there that are using ankle monitors and other technology to keep track of people. And so by doing so, you can have somebody who's being monitored, all right, at an affordable price, less than the $19,000. They still may be, depending on their probation or their sentence, they may be able to work. They may still be a productive person. And the one thing that I've learned is that if you can allow somebody to have some control over their life and own something, okay, and take pride in something, they're less likely to offend again. And I think that with our low-level offenders that are not violent, that are suffering either from mental health or drug addiction, I think there's an opportunity there. It's just convincing enough people that this is the way we got to go. But, on the other hand, if you're a gang member, a drug dealer, you're one of these cartel members that are, trafficking people in for labor and prostitution, which is happening every day here in Oklahoma, lock them up, get them out of here. We can't have that stuff going on. So we need to be tough on crime, but let's be smart on crime and realize there are some folks out there that we can help.
Right, definitely. And Joe, we have just about 1 minute left, and I know I wanted to give you an opportunity in this 1 minute to tell us how to get in contact with you in your campaign, and tell us how we can help out.
Absolutely. We definitely need folks knocking doors and making phone calls. I am proud to say that I have Republicans, Democrats, and Independents helping me out. It is people of all parties are saying that we need a voice here in House District 92. If you want to learn more about me, go on www.joeforoklahoma.com. Once again, www.joeforoklahoma.com. And you can also see me on Facebook on Joe Griffin for HD92, or follow me on Twitter, jgriffinokc@gmail.com.
Joe Griffin, everyone. He is the Republican candidate for State House District 92, and he will definitely be back on with us again. And since we're running out of time, we didn't get to the most exciting part that I want to talk about, and it is some of these off-the-wall bills that some of our legislators are trying to push through. So I'm going to have
maybe we can hit that next week.
Oh, man, yeah. Joe, I want you to come back on, and we're going to talk about some of these bills because the people need to know what's trying to be pushed through.
I tell you, there's no excuse, people, for not paying attention to some of these. It's amazing stuff.
Right. Joe, thank you so much for coming back on the program, and we're looking forward to your return.
Thank you.
Folks, this has been Oklahoma Voice. I am Jonathan Clore. Thanks for listening.